So David A. Williamson is a native of Yanceyville, North Carolina, and he had been deeply affected by identity confusion and other race-related traumas. After his near-death experience in 2017, David's outlook on life and humanity was forever changed. David continues to ground and integrate practical approaches to living and manifesting the best possible realities. Welcome, David. Why don't you come on and share a little bit about who you were before, and then what briefly about what the experience was, and then how it's changed your life.
And before you begin, I'd love it if you could say something about nature too. I heard in one of your podcasts how you grew up in the country and you had this lovely connection to nature. I grew up in the country too, so I don't know. I just connected with so many of your experiences.
Yeah, I'll start there. When I was a kid, I'd say all the way up until 5, 6 years old, and probably a little beyond that. Most of my time was spent in nature. We had I've shared before these vines that kind of grew from the canopy all the way down to the ground, and they were like a jungle gym. They were like swing sets, and I was like I just had a really vivid imagination, and I would like to dig holes and find things, anything, glass. In my mind, I was trying to find like ancient fossils and artifacts, but what I found was always like my treasures, my personal treasures. It was sometimes just old glass that just was a nice color or something, but anything I found to me it was sacred. So I just always was out in nature. I used to catch crayfish and fish with them in creeks, and I mean it was like Huckleberry Finn, you know. Yeah, but I loved it, and I think it the happiest parts of my life were in those times, you know, and in my childhood, and being close to nature, and yeah, feeling more connected.
Me too. Do you think it's a little bit of heaven on earth? Did your near-death experience show you that nature does kind of bring us into a place of heaven on earth?
I do, because my perspective before, I couldn't see all the way up after I drowned when I was 6, and that changed my orientation towards being here. And but my perspective before, I didn't see hope. I didn't see the beauty of this experience. I centered all of these negative stories, narratives, even visions that I had, you know, from childhood up. You know, these things were how I framed, you know, what this experience was, and it wasn't beautiful, and I didn't feel a part of it. And at some point, I didn't want to be a part of it. And but now, every aspect of this experience to me now is it's an opportunity. As long as you don't get your nervous system deeply, deeply, deeply involved in the decisions or the ideas that you're entertaining, you usually can just feel it, think about it, entertain it, and move on to the next idea. But once you are triggered, it's hard to truly think through these issues. And I was pretty much perpetually triggered, you know, after around 6 years old, and everything was it just seemed like it was out to get me, you know.
So paint that picture. So what happened to that kid that was having so much fun?
Yeah, I went to a summer camp and I drowned. And I didn't integrate that as a traumatic experience, but so it really just started coming back up as I've been telling my story through interviews and stuff. But so I had to literally ask my brother, who was at the camp with me, did it happen, you know? And he confirmed for me that I was under the water for no less than 3 or 4 minutes. And the things that I remembered was, you know, blacking out and everything being black, and hearing a voice that said, if you could touch the bottom, you could push yourself back up. And I responded, it doesn't seem like I'm touching the bottom. They say I'm just going down. And as soon as I said that, I stopped and I started floating back up. And as I'm floating up, at some point, my attention is up and I can see light coming through the top of the water. And then I saw a splash, and then I could see the rings radiating from that splash. And that captivated me for a while. And at some point, I just put my hand in the middle and I hit a stick and they pulled me out. My brother said I didn't cough or didn't have to get, water pumped out of me or anything like that. He said I coughed a couple times and just sat there. I didn't really have to, there wasn't any resuscitation or anything, and I don't remember, again, that being a traumatic experience for me. The voice, I think, kind of guided me through it, and it made it not, a traumatic experience, but I changed a lot after that. And I started having deeper spiritual experiences after that.
And it's interesting, that was like the pre-near-death experience to the near-death experience came a
Yeah.
lot later. And I have so many questions for you, but I do want you to just tell us about your life leading up to your heart attack and that profound near-death experience. And I just want to say, I grew up in East Texas and I understand, like I read Invisible Man, and at a very young age, like I looked around and I saw racism, and it hurt me deeply. And people who went on to say in the educational field that racism doesn't exist, I'm like, they're blind. Like, I mean, I saw how teachers treated different students. I saw how, racism existed. And if you're a sensitive person, you experience it, but you experienced it at a deeper level. So it's understandable, the field that you went into. And anyway, I'll just let you tell the story though.
Yeah. But I would, early in my life, I've always had really strange spiritual experiences, but early in my life, seeing the KKK and seeing, marching up and down the street, those things, and just the whole racial tension that I grew up in, it just pretty much informed how I felt everybody dealt with race. Like I just assumed this was the normal way to deal with race. You're just supposed to hate each other, because I didn't see a lot of relationships that were good. And then even if I did see interactions, when they left, you would hear, comments like, this person is this or that, but so I never really saw a whole lot of just healthy relationships, across racial lines. And so I didn't pursue them in my life. I didn't trust. I just hated the same way that I felt that I was hated by them. And then when I drowned, and after that, I started seeing what appeared to be like timelines of the future, and it was always negative. It was a lot of death, and it didn't give me a lot of hope, and then I also had a memory of what seems to be a memory of being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I started seeing that vividly at age 6 as well, and it that deeply affected me. It made me it made me really sensitive about war, and about like I didn't like the idea of war. I didn't trust that nuclear weapons would not be used again, and I didn't like it. So I went through my life having all these deeply connected in many ways spiritually, but still this narrative is the only thing is guiding, how I operate in life. Hating, being sick for years and years and years, from hating people, and just assuming that they hate me. So just almost inventing a volatile environment everywhere I go. Everybody hates me. They all hate me, and digestive issues for years, lost my gallbladder, hypertension, and then the heart attack happened February 7th, 2017. My valve ripped February 1st, 2017, and the pain was crazy, but I played football, so I have 7 herniated discs, 2 torn, 2 bulging, and I assumed that it was just some back pain, so I just tried to integrate it. And then 7 days later, I felt it. I finally felt it in my chest, because before it was only in my shoulder and back. And I started feeling the effects of it at the 7th day, and I had to go to the emergency room. And well, once I got there, I tell the joke about cussing the guy out, often, but because he wanted me to sign papers, but I was pretty much about to pass out. And I always want to make sure I'd say too that I apologize to him after that, because I felt bad for being, so anxious that I didn't consider him, fully. And but once I was on the gurney, which was pretty immediate, pretty quickly after I got there, I was out, and I was still in my body initially, But as they turned the corner and I could see the doors initially for a second, I could see the doors to where I was going to be going into where they were going to be defibrillating me. And then I was out before they went through the doors. And like I was just seeing specks of light, like stars almost. It was blackness, but wherever people were, they were like specks of light, like stars, and or pixels, you know. And I experienced it like that for a while. Couldn't really hear anything. Everything was just garbled noise, and then I was out of my body looking down at everything, and I was just like right beneath the ceiling, just kind of watching everything. And so and I've shared, you know, a lot of this, but the thing for me that I think made it easy for me to kind of take this mystical experience and direct it back at myself and my life was the things that I heard, you know, the words, the phrases that I heard. And one of them was, and after, because I was out of my body, I just felt perfect. I didn't feel any confusion or really even any sadness at all about what was happening. It was just clarity, you know. But I was looking at my body and I was like, he's dead. You used to be there. And but there was no, oh my God, what was me? I'm dying or I'm dead. And then it was the, you know, his body, mind, and ego was dead. And then I asked what was left. And that's, you know, the flood of words came in: spirit, soul, awareness, consciousness, and all of that. But I think the phrase that I heard that made it easy for me to ground, to help me or push me in a direction of grounding my experience or looking in the mirror at the very least, was you killed yourself with your personality. And that was the phrase that I heard that immediately made sense to me. And it immediately, it was related to everything. It wasn't just personality. It was my response to outside stimulus, my making up stories and living in those stories, my constantly triggering myself with the thoughts and ideas that I held inside of me that didn't necessarily, my reality didn't necessarily reflect these things. And I knew all of that. I knew that I made myself sick with all of the ideation that I entertained when I didn't even have to. You know, I had my attention on things that either one was invented or two just didn't deserve my attention, especially if I'm trying to have an experience that's my own. I don't have to lend my attention to everything that's happening in this planet or every piece of information that's available to me. If I'm trying to own my experience, then I need to own my attention. And so I didn't do that. I yielded my attention to everything that was out, and I paid the cost for that. Now I just, one thing that I tried to share with people is, because when I was out of my body in space, what the most comfortable word that I use to describe what I seem to be is attention. I seem to be attention. And I believe that that's how we create this experience. That's how we move through our experience. That's how we recombine with other ideas. Our attention attaches to an idea. We entertain the idea, and we can process it and present it back out a different way, or we can just continue to repeat that idea the same way. But we interface with ideas with our attention. We interface with this entire experience with our attention, and we just have to, you know, be more responsible with it.
I love that idea of attention. And even though I have heard parts of your near-death experience, I think it's very healing to hear it again. So you're out in space, you're getting these downloads. Tell us more about what that felt like to you.
Yeah, the way a lot of the NDEs describe it is love, and that to me is adequate, but it feels so much more like it. I felt like I was that love. It felt like I was existing in that love. Everything felt like that, and it was tangible. It wasn't just a thought, an idea, a word. It was like electricity. It felt like something physical, you know. And so sometimes, you know, love sometimes doesn't always work. It seems it's just like a oneness, just a connectedness with everything, you know, that was just beautiful. But initially I was in the void, and everything seemed to be there. It was just this beautiful blackness that seemed, it was thick, you know, like almost tangible blackness, like velvet almost as you move through it. And I could see faint images of faces, hear noises, sometimes words, but I couldn't make anything out. The faces, when I focused on them for any period of time, they kind of just faded away, like almost like smoke. But it felt like everything and everybody was there, you know, and that's weird, but it felt like everything was in that space. And at some point I was coming out of it and I could look down into it and everything still felt like love. Everything felt perfect. I was still clear as what was happening. I didn't have, after was out of the void, I didn't remember being a human being, but when I looked back into the emergency room where they were resuscitating me, I remembered my context as a human being. I didn't think about personal stuff though. I was concerned about the people that were in the emergency room. There was a lady holding her face like this that was really sad. I wanted her to feel better. I didn't want her to be sad about me dying. And the guy that was holding the defibrillator pads was really anxious about what was happening, and I wanted him to feel better. But I really didn't look at my body after I left. I didn't consider what was happening to my body. I was just watching the people in the room, and I wanted them to be okay with me leaving. And so I'll say some more about space. The things that I saw as I came out of the void were just space. It was beautiful. I didn't have any experience with any religious artifact or angel or anything like that. It was just me in space and this love. And but when I looked straight ahead and to the left a little bit, there was like a star forming region. And it was beautiful, and it is like the cotton candy colors, like red, blue, white, and they gradated down into the lighter colors, from dark to the lighter colors down to white. And then it was also, white clouds as well. And you could see the faint stars forming inside of that area. Everywhere that I looked, I typically the distance between me and that space disappeared. But as it related to the star forming region, I stopped at the clouds. I never went into the star forming region. And I didn't think or talk about within myself why I shouldn't or should do it. But it seemed like that was just a place that was sacred and I just shouldn't enter it too closely. But everywhere else, I just kind of zigzagged all over space and just was looking at things. And I saw this asteroid, and I mention it sometimes, but I don't always. But it was like a red rock, and it was circular, but half of it had like a band around it, almost like it wasn't a naturally made, structure, but it didn't have a signature. Like everything else still emanated that love. That seemed like a rock. You know what I'm saying? But it looked strange, and so I stared at that for a while. And then I just, like I said, I wanted to travel. I could see the light. The emergency room where I was being worked on was down and to the left. The light was up and to the right, but it was very, very far away from me. And it looked like a star. It looked like a big star that was very far away from me. And it had a pull. If I didn't intend myself to move any direction, I would slowly, move in that direction. But I wanted to travel, so I didn't let myself get pulled in any direction. I just moved around, and it was like everything was and the was like a lot of words, like what is that, like well, wow. It was so many. Meant a lot to me when I was in space. And it helped propel me through space. Every time I looked at something and said, I moved to it, and I understood what it was in that moment, almost instantaneously. And yeah, that part was beautiful. I felt like I was growing. I felt like when I covered the space, like I knew the space. I knew it all. Every bit of space that I covered, I knew it instantaneously. And I felt like I could just do that, just continue to just move through space and learn. And that's what I was probably going to do. And there is a thought deep in me is that I might have eventually stumbled upon Earth, but I seemed so far away that it didn't seem likely in that moment or in that space that I was in. So
I have these dreams where before this life, friends and I are like ribbons of light in space, just kind of merging with one another, just flying around. So I think the soul does that. Like there's a lot of souls over there who want to just experience that freedom. So that's so cool that you're validating that. And did you get pulled towards that loving light?
I got pulled when I wasn't moving. Like if I was just sitting and kind of just observing, I could feel movement in that direction. It wasn't like a jerk or a snatching or any like really aggressive pull, but it was a slow kind of moving in that direction if I didn't move anywhere. But anytime I moved, that pull wasn't noticeable. I could move. I was free to move, but that pull was, I could feel it whenever I stopped, you know. Yeah. And it felt almost just like, if you consider it scientifically, if it was a huge star, then it would have a strong gravitational pull. So it kind of felt literally like gravity, like it was just pulling me in that direction. So
And what happened next?
I kept looking back into the emergency room at the people that I was concerned about. And while I was looking at the woman that was holding her face, I was really, really trying to figure out how to talk to her and tell her that everything was fine and that she shouldn't feel that way. And they resuscitated me when my attention was in that space. And I just immediately blurted out. As soon as they resuscitated me, I opened my eyes and blurted out, "Are you okay?" And I looked for her, but I don't recall if she was even a person or not, if she was even there. I don't recall seeing her. And it could be because there were so many people around me that I just couldn't see her, period, at all. But I don't know if she was even there. And and then I looked at the guy that was holding the defibrillator pads and I asked him if he was okay. And but the first thought I had was, damn, they woke me up. I couldn't believe they woke me up. Like I just wanted to travel through space. I was a little bit disappointed, but I did want to make sure that the people that were in there that were feeling so much, I wanted to make sure that they were okay. And after that, I laid back, and this is a funny part that I don't always share, but there was a guy that was like in my face, like really, really close. I don't know if he was a real person or not. And but he looked like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. And and his eyes were really wild, and he was really close to my face, and he said, "What did you see?" And I didn't know how to answer it initially because I was like, there's a whole lot that I saw, but I'm like, I'm not even going to go into that. So I just looked at him and I matched his energy. I put my eyes real big and I said, "Blackness." I always think that's funny because I could have given him a little more, but I was already back in my personality somewhat. Like I don't always, okay, I can be a jokester. So I kind of jumped back immediately back into that. So it was just funny that happened that way.
Yay to the jokesters of the world. Those who don't include the sacred clown are missing the whole point of this journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get that. That's what I resonate with your journey too, is like you knew immediately what had happened. Like you came back with that knowing. And was it kind of an instant embodying from the moment you came back to your body?
Not well, not really,
Mm.
because I think that if I had more of that instant knowing, it would have been less difficult for me to come back and get back in the swing of things. But it took me 3.5 years to even start really sharing it deeply with a lot of people, because I wanted to go back. I wanted to leave. I couldn't even imagine how to come back here and be a human. Like I didn't know. I'm like, rat race, going to work 8 hours a day. Like what? Like I can't imagine doing that stuff anymore. Like, and nothing that I valued before I valued anymore. Like I've spent almost 20 years as an IT guy, and I don't care about doing IT work anymore. I don't care about any of that stuff. It doesn't matter to me. And I think now what I would prefer to do is something that matters. And so that is even, a part of my grounding, a part of my integration is coming back here and finding things that matter to me and doing those things and putting myself in a position to be able to do those things with the most of the time that I have remaining on this planet, because I can guarantee one way or another, I'm not going to be doing the rat race, for the rest of my time here, because it's at this point with, I guess, sensitivity or whatever it is that changes, but you do change. it's not sustainable for me. It's yeah, I have to decompress so much every day, from being in at work all day, and so I know I can't continue to do it, and it's keeping me from learning and relearning like the way that I need to in order to really be able to find opportunities for myself that are outside of the norm. I need to learn. I need to read. I need to network, and sitting there 8 hours kind of cuts into that.
So I want to go back to when you were out of your body in space and you had all these false beliefs about yourself and the world. And you felt separate before. And then at some point you are out of your body. You're not your body. You're not the color. There is no body. What was that like for you? How was that when you first saw, I am not all these things that I thought?
When I first came out of my body and looked down, one of the first, it seemed to be almost a human thought, was like, oh, so this is how it happens, and so and I felt relief because I didn't assume that there would be nothing. I assumed that there would be some experience, and but as I transitioned into that space, it was like but it was seamless. It was seamless. There was at no point did I lose awareness. Now, awareness changed, and sometimes it was a little sketchy, but I was always present. I was always present throughout the entire transition. So the moving around, and then what made me kind of see what I was outside of my body was moving my attention back and forth from the light back into the emergency room. I would look up and then I would go back down. And when my attention came back down, it went through the orb that I was. And that's when I realized that what I am out here is just this orb of light, looks like a star. I couldn't really determine how big I was in relationship to anything else, but I was just a star, or orb of light. And that to me is what changed how I view myself as a human being and everybody else, was because if I'm an orb of light, everybody, once they leave their body, has to be an orb of light. I'm not special, I'm not different, I'm not unique. I'm in a body just like everybody else is in a body. These bodies are 99% the same. Nervous systems are what dictate how we, interpret this reality, experience this reality. Our nervous systems don't differ that vastly. So my assumption is that everybody has that same knowing, perfect orb of light, that is what they are, and that's what I assume myself to be. So if I assume everybody else to be that, so it makes it easier to deal with any human being now, because I assume to be this perfect orb of light that is in this body, and this body might be having trauma, this body might believe nonsense, this body might be confused, but I don't have to judge them for that, because I went through that same experience and I was confused, I was angry, I was sick as a result of accepting a lot of ideas that don't make sense. There's no reason for me to hate anybody for doing the same idiotic thing that I did. I can sympathize with them and I can try to walk with them, into a different way of looking at reality if they're open to it. If not, I'm just not going to feed any kind of anger. I'm just not going to hate them. I can't do that anymore, because I know how that turns out. It doesn't work inside of me. It doesn't work with me, and it didn't allow me to think clearly. So that's not my orientation. I'm not going to do that.
How do you see? Okay, so some of the people in North Carolina and so forth, do you see them differently now? Like some of the racist people and do you see them just the way that you saw them then before the ND? Has it changed since? How do you see them?
Now everybody is just a beautiful human being having a human experience, and I don't really care what kind of ideologies they carry with them, because I know that it's attention. If you are born into a circumstance where there's a lot of specific kind of ideas that are being spread, and everybody accepts them because that's just the way it is, you're more of a victim of that than you are a person that needs to be kind of chastised or hated for that. And I was that way. I grew up in a town where that was just the normal thinking. And so people back there, I look at I was a victim of that. So the people who are victims of that are white, black, they're every color, every race. So I look at them as victims of that as well. And that's it. And I can sympathize with them, understanding that they are not behaving in their perfection. And I can understand why they're not. It's trauma, it's storytelling, it's narratives, it's stuff that I believe, the stuff that I allow to distract me from my behaving more in my perfection.
So
Yeah.
I have a question from a viewer about that exact topic. And she saw your video, and she wants to know, like, how do we heal systemic racism, and how do we go about working to heal, all the different types of trauma that people do experience? Because, that's part of it. And how do you not experience burnout too when you're working with traumatized populations of people? That's something she wants to know because she works with in that area.
Well, for me, to the healing from it was partially it's been unlearning, like unlearning triggered responses, unlearning prepackaged responses, unlearning ideas that I thought were just truth, unlearning all of this stuff that is just not truth. That once you look at it and you realize that it's not true, and it's going back through your life and seeing where you started accepting these things and change the orientation that you had when you came here, because the orientation that children have when they come here is pretty open. They're not rigid, and they're not functioning with a lot of small guiding principles. They're just kind of open, and they're moving forward, and they're open to everybody and everything around them. And so the more we accept these identity things, these ideology things, our perspective gets smaller and smaller and smaller until our experience becomes limited by the very ideas that we've put our attention on, and assume have to be real. If this stuff has to be real, then I have to function in an XYZ way in order to just be here. But once you drop the attachment to the ideas and the ideology, you have the freedom to be whatever you want to be. You have the freedom to choose and relearn and reframe all of these ideas that exist here, because an infinite number of possibilities exist here, but you can't experience infinite. You can't experience it all in a single lifetime. So you have to be pretty clear about what you want out of your experience and put your attention there. And there's always pleasant surprises. You can move your attention, as you feel free, but holding it a little bit more closer to your core allows the things that you put it on to actually manifest. It increases the likelihood of they manifest and becoming the experience that you're having. But when you dilute your attention and you want to save the entire planet at the same time that you want to create a beautiful experience for yourself, it makes it a bit more difficult. So I would say our attention, that relationship is important. Keep your attention focused on the things that you want, out of your experience, so that you can have the best experience that you can, that you could potentially have here. And then participating in every other game that's being played on this planet is so much easier once you are grounded, once you are clear, once you are self-aware, because it's not an emotional pursuit at that point. It's not a anger pursuit. It's not a hate pursuit. It's a responsibility pursuit. We're responsible for making this planet better. We're responsible for learning how to behave. and there's no external force that's going to do it for us. There's no external force to blame for our misbehavior. We have to behave better. And it's as simple as that. And as mystical as my experience was, that's a very normal, like it's a very human and grounded physical solution to a lot of the problems that we have. We just need to be better. We need to treat each other better. We need to stop, living through the narratives and the ideologies and the identity stuff, because it's not necessary. It's not. And as far as avoiding burnout, well, I realized in coming back and talking to different people that I'm a reflector and in human design, and so I don't have internal. I don't even know all of the language. It's all new to me, but I'm nothing is like nothing is really on, you know. So I don't naturally I don't hold on to the ideas the way uh what I've realized is that I don't have to. I can entertain any idea that I want to entertain and just let it go. And whereas before I was holding on to all of these ideas and they affected me deeply and it made it impossible for me to help other people because all my junk was in the way. How can I hear and receive and integrate or take in something that's being presented to me if I'm already full of a bunch of baggage? So the way to keep burning out is goes back to the unlearning stuff, is disconnecting from rigid orientations, disconnecting from conclusions that you've made about reality that aren't based in reality, they're based in narratives or based in trauma. Getting rid of all of that stuff so that you're at a blank slate. And then now, anytime any idea or thought comes up, you can entertain it, you know, as it comes up, versus constantly having to battle with all these different ideas at the same time, and then trying to help somebody else who's dumping more ideas into you. Empty yourself and to let them pour themselves into you, dump that out, and then go back to you, you know. And you can do that through a lot of different ways. I mean, grounding, as Felice spoke about, there's a lot of ways that you can, when you detach from or leave a situation where you've been in some intense kind of engagement, to just kind of get back to yourself. But it's flattening your nervous system back out, getting your nervous system back to you, getting back to your normal, and being very mindful of that. Like being very mindful of when you're triggered or when your nervous system is responding to something in a way that is not necessarily that is unhealthy, but it's just extreme, and you're feeling it, and it's worth taking note of and trying to understand where it's coming from. And anytime you feel these extreme nervous system responses, you should pause and figure out where that energy or what information am I responding to? Because sometimes it's old stuff that's just embedded in our bodies. And it's time to let some of that stuff go, because it distracts you from receiving new information and being really able to help people and to let them pour their pain or their story into you without it affecting you, you know.
There's a question about space. She says, was it unlike what science tells us about how the universe works, or was there anything that you saw that really surprised you, perhaps besides that asteroid?
Everything seemed to be consistent with science, but more so like maybe speculative science. Like the way that I moved through space was like was at the speed of thought. Like it wasn't, you know, it was instantaneous. It was and so they speak about folding space and moving through wormholes or portals and stuff like that in science these days. A lot of it is speculative or relatively new science, but they've been speaking about it at least speculatively for a long time, or theoretically for a long time. So I don't think that the stuff that I saw, even the black hole or the void, I don't know, I even seem to understand how they work a little bit. You know, when I was 19, I was fixated on black holes anyway. But when I was 19, I drew a diagram of how I thought black holes worked. And like 9 years later, I read an article from NASA saying that this is how black holes work. And so for me, I learned a little bit more about black holes while I was there, and that's that they do different things based on their density, and some of them are fixed and some of them move. And I didn't read about that. It was a conversations that I had with another person who had NDE, and indeed we're just sharing notes on black holes, you know, and what she's, you know, experienced in terms of black holes and what she's intuited. But a lot of that can be confirmed in science. A lot of the ideas that we shared, you know, about black holes. So I don't think that it really conflicts with science.
So I want to ask the way that there's so much hatred in this world, and you experienced before your NDE, you know, people being unkind. How now, based on what you experienced in your NDE, how do you see people like that now? How do you respond, and how could you tell the audience, you know, how to respond to unkind people now versus the way you might have before your NDE?
Yeah. Now I will say this, because I'm not looking for these interactions, these negative I don't experience them as much anymore. And I'm also not walking around with a scowl. I'm not angry at the world. So I smile more. So that decreases the likelihood of me having these experiences. But when there is, well, I had a moment where I would even say that I might have somewhat regressed. It was a guy that he was being really horrible, and it was seemed to be race, or I didn't just want to straight out say he's being racist, but because I don't immediately just point to that. I just look, he's a miserable person and he's being miserable. That's and but it seemed like it was probably racially motivated, and it angered me. And he kept talking about something other than why he was really being that way. And I leaned in close to him, and I just told him, shut up. I said, shut up. I didn't yell, I didn't raise my voice, and I said it 3 times, like, shut up, and and then I just walked away. And that's not, I wouldn't say that that's a healthy way of interacting with the person, but it's better than what I probably would have done in the past. But and even that, I was disappointed in myself for that. I remember even leaving, saying to myself that I should go back and apologize to him for telling him to shut up after he made me feel so horrible. They didn't serve. I was sitting in the restaurant for like 30 minutes and nobody came over. And then when I spoke to him about it, he said it was because I had a cup from outside. And I said, well, you could have told me that. I would have threw it away, but you're just sitting here hating me. I'm just sitting here thinking.
Would you say you have more of a
Yeah.
compassion now for people like
Far
that
more.
than you used to?
Far more compassion, because if I don't trigger anything from this person, like if I know that my nervous system is flat and I'm not approaching this situation with any kind of bias, I know that I didn't elicit that. If I know that I didn't elicit that, then this person is just who they are, and I don't have to take that personally. I don't, and a lot of what I do now, sometimes I just laugh and walk away. But I'm not going to engage with anger. I'm just not, because I don't see the point of it. Like, there are some people that you can feel when there's a conversation that can happen, and then I'll start a conversation. But then there's some people that they feel like brick walls, and I'll just kind of smile. I might shake my head and just kind of take care, and just keep moving. But it's not gonna be volatile. I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
Right.
that's there are ways to calm people down. I found, like someone had something in the chat of you would be great working with young people, and I think you would, like, high schoolers, college students. And every time I meet a group of students, I tell them, look, I know you may have had trauma with other teachers, but I'm your cheerleader. I'm here to help you. This is who I am. I love each of you and want you to succeed. And just by telling people, that, smiling at them the way you say,
Yeah.
by meeting them with good energy, it really does disarm people, because I
Yeah.
think most people want to have a good experience in person with others. Like they want to. We want to play like children. We want to
Mhm.
like one another, and it's almost like you set it up in a way for more of those interactions to happen.
Yeah. I just smile at, like, there are people who walk past me sometimes and they look like just miserable. They look like I might have looked, before my NDE. And I just smile at them, and then sometimes they smile back. Sometimes they look confused, like, what was that? But I just keep going. But I'm not going to carry any energy into any situation that's going to lower the energy of the situation. Like, that's never my intention. And no matter where I'm at and no matter who I'm around, if I'm going to be there, I want to add to it, and if I don't know how to add to it, then I can excuse myself. I don't have to sit there and be in the way or be a distraction, but I do want to always try to improve, be a plus, a positive to the environment that I'm in.
That is the NDE phenomenon. I think I walked around smiling at everyone, and it's amazing how many people are miserable, or how many people
Yeah.
feel crazy for smiling. They're
Yeah.
like, but there are the people that are glad.
I used to think people who were happy were fake. I did not trust happiness. It was not a part of my reality. I was miserable. And every time I saw people smiling and just giddy all the time, I'm like, yeah, they're just fake. And I didn't even allow myself to have close relationships with people that way. I just was like, I don't even want to be around that fake stuff. Ain't nobody that happy, you know? And I know now that that's crazy, you know? That's crazy to think that way, you know?
I know it is like it's so different. You sound like it was just such a huge change from who you were then and who you were
Yeah.
after the NDE. And I love stories like that. I resonate with that. And how do you tell someone who's kind of lost in that anger, that they can find greater joy? I mean, how do you reach like maybe even angry younger people?
Yeah. One thing I say, because there was some feedback I was getting from young, and they might pop up every now and then, is that this is like a sellout orientation. These people hate you. You're not supposed to talk all this love stuff. That's selling out. And what I say to that, because that I probably in that age that the people that are saying that, I probably would have thought the same thing, like, oh, that's Pollyanna stuff. That ain't gonna work. All that lovey, But now what I've come to realize is that I carry so much hate. It could perhaps been transmuted and became energy that propelled me to do something, but it never did. Hate is really not going to create much. For one, um, it's coming from a lower part of your brain. It's not coming from a part of your brain, and it keeps you stuck in a lower part of your brain that doesn't really allow you to think super clearly. So you can create this whole framework that sounds logical and all of this, like I did. I studied all kinds of philosophies and religions that gave me a whole lot of nice words to explain my ignorance, but it sounded good, but it was still ignorance. It was still bias. It was still storytelling. It was still making stuff up to fit what it is that I'd already thought about reality. So hate to me, it's if you're going to function in that, you better do something. You better build something. You better create something. You better constantly get that energy out of you every day. Because if you just sit around and hate, which is easy to do in the internet age, because there's so many people that all they do every day is sit and send hate all over the internet, and they don't get up. They don't get up and go out and build nothing. They don't get up and go out and run, or they just sit and hate on the internet all day. Like, it's easier to do that now than it has been in the past. So it's a dangerous kind of cycle to get pulled into, of just hating and doing nothing. Because in doing something, at least you'll get some good chemicals pumping through your brain, accomplishing something. And it might give you the opportunity to change and be like, okay, this hate exists. I'm feeling all of this stuff. But when I do this, for some reason, it feels good. And if that thing that feels good is actually directed at fixing some of the problems that lead to your hate or that lead to your anger or disappointment in reality, then now you're fixing the problem and you're using the energy in a productive way, and that for me is all that it boils down to. While I was hating, I wasn't creating. While I was hating, I wasn't building. While I was hating, I wasn't fixing problems. If I had took everything that gave me that hateful orientation and said, what could I point to that could make me feel better? What could I do that could make me feel better? And I actually did it, then I probably would have found some peace in that. But sitting around doing nothing but hating and thinking and making up stories inside of your head and then speaking to other people in like an echo chamber that kind of just affirms your bias as well, you're not going to grow. You're not going to do much that's going to be helpful to the system itself. And that's another part of it, is that some people do understand these concepts very deeply, but it's only within their circle. Outside of their circle, everybody is not. These concepts don't apply to them, and that's not reality. That's not reality. You can't. That's a part of the problem. That's war. That's a war mentality to say that only the people in this circle matter. Everybody outside don't matter. That's what creates a lot of the problems that we have today. So yeah.
So back on the other side, did you go to the light?
No, I go ahead. I'm sorry.
You didn't. No, yeah. So did you go to the light? And then, so where did you get this realization from? Did you experience? Did you have any guides, or what did you experience?
When I sat in space, there were moments where I just looked and just looked around, and it just felt like I was becoming one with the reality. And in that moment, like, one thing that I used to say to myself when I came back is, like, I felt like I understood like the makings, of the universe, like how it's held together. I felt like I was gleaning that. And um, not to say that any of that or all of that knowing stuck or anything like that, but I think,
Right.
yeah, what's happening with me, and I think here now is just, it's unlearning more so than it is some mystical, magical learning that's happening,
Right, unlearning what you thought you,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think the
So would
energy
you
is
say that
creating
you
an opportunity.
knew, you just had this instant knowing? Was it like a remembering maybe?
Remembering is perfect word for it, because I think once you get all of the noise out of your system, once you get all of the noise out of yourself, you are more receptive. You are more self-aware. You feel your body even. Like I feel my body change, and and that it gives me the opportunity to know, to be aware that a thought might come from that, or there may be or impatience may come from that, or anything might come from the physical change that may happen. But it's just my awareness is just really in me most of the time, and I'm paying attention to my nervous system. I'm paying attention to how I respond to things that I might have been triggered by in the past. I'm paying attention to all of it so that I can kind of gauge my own growth. I think it's really important for me to really ground, and that's going to be a forever process for me. And but along the way, the self-awareness is just increasing to the point where um I don't know, it it makes me want to be better. Like it just makes me want to be better and constantly trim the fat, and get rid of all of the information and stuff that's not necessary for me to have moving forward in my experience.
Yeah, so what are some tools that maybe you can share with people that you have implemented in your life to do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, one of the biggest thing is, to me, whatever the event is, whether it's an NDE, a psychedelic trip, or just some spontaneous kind of happening, like really, really pay attention to that event. Like make note of when it happened. Make note of any changes that are in you as before and after. Make note of all of the differences. That pivot is where I think the opportunity is. The seeing yourself before, seeing yourself after, that's the pivot that creates the opportunity to truly become something else. And I think it's spoken of in ancient times. I think it's spoken of in the Bible. It's spoken of all the time, I think, throughout history. Excuse me. But I think in that pivot is also the time where you have to start unlearning or relearning ideas and concepts that you've been so attached to, that led to your passionate. My passion was attached to a lot of ideas that I've later come to find out they weren't balanced ideas. They were very biased and centric. And as I unlearned or detached my nervous system from these ideas, because I don't think our nervous system should be attached to ideas in that way, you can hear the information without there being a trigger, and that's the important part, is the things that triggered you the most. Learn to not be triggered by them. Expose yourself to them. Go deeper than what you had been before in that idea, so that the idea in and of itself just becomes less of an issue for you. And that's kind of what's happening in my life spontaneously, without me even really having to be involved in it. I'm more open to meeting other people, so I'm meeting other people, and I'm meeting other people from all walks of life, and they're teaching me. They're teaching me that my biases that I had before were lies, and it's a constant confirmation of that. Like I'm constantly seeing that the way that I was before was part of the problem that disallowed me to see the beauty in every human being on the planet. Whereas no attachment to identity, no attachment to ideology, or any of the triggers that I had before. Everything is just an opportunity. Every person is just a repository of knowledge, of information that I can learn from. That's it, and they're
And
vast.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because for many of us it is a relearning, because we saw what we're not, and that, I mean, for me it's like I feel like a 5-year-old relearning
Yeah,
things.
that's it.
Because yeah,
And what's important after the relearning is reframing your reality, reframing how you see things, reframing how you define this thing. And for me, that involves so much more less conclusions than it involves questions. you know, and then from there you got to do something, and that's where I struggle at, is in the doing, you know, and so I'm working on the doing, because the doing is what kind of re-habituates your nervous system and your body and your brain to being open to good things, good feelings, good chemicals, good, you know, good triggers, you know, and that's what has to happen. You cannot engage reality through the same framing and the same words and ideologies that you had before you pivot. You have to learn healthier orientation and function in that way and do in that way, so that your body can be different. Its baseline can be a lot flatter than it was before, and it disallowed the bias to even be set in.
And to that point, there's a question that a person has
Right.
asked in the chat about your health. Like, you look vibrant and healthy, and you know,
Yeah.
have digestive issues cleared up. And how does that mindset affect your body? And how, like,
Yeah.
about health for a bit, if you would.
I'm healthy, but what I will say is there's some like little challenges that I'm probably dealing with, because my hypertension, it was gone for a long time, to the point where I just didn't even think I had it anymore. But then I found out that I might be dealing with another thing, you know, that could be influencing it. So I'm gonna know more about that in like 2 weeks to see, because I'm typically a lot more calm and flat these days. My blood pressure is typically the same every time I check it. But there's these spikes that happen, and they're just random. And it may be physiological, it may be a hardware, you know. So I'm just waiting on some results and some blood work back to figure out what could be causing those spikes. But as far as like my thoughts, and the only thing that really keeps me now from being clear and kind of always kind of at peace and feeling good inside of the body is just, you know, other people's stress, you know. Like other people's stress, and my responsibilities, like the things that I need to do, the relationships that I've created, established, like there's work to do in those, and sometimes that's not always easy for me, you know. But those are the things that, you know, more so than anything, changes my state. Most of the time though, I'm in the same state, you know. But I feel good. I feel good. So,
I want to thank you so much, David. There's let's see, I think we don't have time for one more, but I want to remind everyone, you can find David on Facebook. I'm going to stick that in the chat. And then you can also ask more questions in the Hawaiian Islands Facebook group, which I'll put for all the speakers, because it's hard. I know that everybody has lots of questions, but thank you so much, David. It's been an honor. So glad that you
thank you
made
all
it
for
here
having
today.
me.
Well, thank you so
Oh,
much.
man.
It was a joy. I
Yeah.
love to laugh, so I'm totally on board with the humor.
Yeah.